As we record this show in late September of 2024, there's a lot of worry and fear regarding the future of this country, the direction we as a world might be heading, and of course, what this might mean to the devaluation of those dollars you are depending on to see you through retirement. In other words, there's a lot of bad news out there fueling the fear that what we expect to happen in the future might not only be but more bad news. And since I'm not sitting around holding my breath for the politicians in Washington, nor the talking heads on TV to give me anything better to expect, I am doing what more frequently that I'm doing, and that's the act of turning away from the bad news offered up by the world and instead leaning on the good news offered by God. Yet it does beg the question, if this God of the universe spoken of in the Bible is so full of good news, why in the world does he allow the bad news to happen? In other words, what is his purpose in allowing all this bad news? Well, in my humble opinion, I believe the bad news is given to us so that we more clearly might see the good news offered by God. And here's the thing, his ability to overcome anything that's bad. Don't believe me? Check it out in Exodus 14:13, where Moses and his band of merry Jews are about to become toast as an overwhelming army of Egyptians have them cornered and about to kill them all, when all of a sudden God steps in and takes the worst news of all and gives the Jews much more than they ever expected: salvation. Notice the faith on display by Moses as he tells his people, "Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the Lord's salvation, which he will accomplish for you today." Moses goes on to say, "For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again." Now that's what I call a great example of expecting the best when apparently things seem the worst. Moses has a lot of expectations of God, so let's take a deeper look. In this verse, we learn from Moses that when faced with bad news, like getting ready to die, the first response to that fear that ensues is not to try to fix the problem ourselves, but to stand still and focus on God. Why? Because we know from experience that with bad news comes fear, and with fear comes the opportunity for the world to take advantage of our fears. Take the concerns over the value of the dollar and what might happen to it. Do you realize how many soothsayers apparently have the magic financial bullet to replace this dollar? They're everywhere, and they are playing on your fears in hopes of what? Getting your money. It's that simple. In other words, most people are most vulnerable to get snookered when they are most fearful of the future, which is why Moses reminds the people to not run, don't fight, don't give up, and don't attack an enemy you cannot defeat, but rather sit still and, yes, stand firm. Why? Because God has proven time and time again that when faced with bad news, if we will but trust and stand firm and expect the best, it oftentimes is the only response needed. You know, it's hard to watch God's mighty hand at work if we are trying to step in to do the work for him. No, to watch God work requires us to stand still and stand firm. Notice the Egyptians are not wiped out by the efforts of man, but by the will of God. A God that literally has the power to part the seas upon his very command, reminding us that in verse 14, "It is the Lord who will fight for you, and he will fight for me, if only we will be still." Not to get into politics, by the way, but I find it interesting that both of our current presidential candidates are telling us to vote for them because they will fight for us. Well, friend, I don't know about you, but if my back is against the wall and I'm expecting the best outcome, with all due respect to our presidential candidates, I'm not expecting the best from them. Instead, I'm expecting the best from God. And it's not just Moses and a little man in a sweater vest who is expecting the best from God. Check it out, where the Apostle Paul, who's stuck in prison, says the following in 2 Corinthians 12:9. He says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in weakness. Therefore, I will all the more boast gladly in my weaknesses." Why? So that the power of Christ may rest on me. Of this taking bad news and expecting the best from God, the late great theologian Charles Spurgeon quotes Psalms 112:7, where he says, "He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord." Spurgeon sums up David's thought this way: "The ungodly, when they are overtaken by bad news, rebel against God. They murmur and think God deals harshly with them. But with Christians, our reaction should be that of David and of Moses, to stand still and see the salvation of God and have no fear of the bad news." That's it. Be still, stand still, and expect the best in whatever God's will might be for you. Because in the end, that's all we've got, is the salvation of God. And that's some good news you and I can expect to take to the bank. Amen?
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like, check out these other clips. And be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button for more videos.